Welcome, everyone. My name is David Clayton. I'm here with Andrew Goldstein, and we're going to talk about our upcoming book, Musica Domestica. Before I do so, I just want to say that the IHE is one of the nation's leading institutes committed to identifying the conditions conducive to human flourishing from an interdisciplinary perspective, taking wisdom, humility, and charity for its patron virtues. And the Institute strives to foster open dialogue, intellectual friendship, and moral clarity. So my involvement in the book Musica Domestica began with a talk I gave about 2 years ago now at a classical academy in South Bend, Indiana, home of Notre Dame University. And I spoke about the Way of Beauty program. It's a program of formation that we offer through Scala Foundation, where I'm artist in residence and program director. And it's integration of prayer, art, music, and chant. And after the talk, Andrew approached me and asked me about my reference to singing the Psalms in the home. So I'm going to give the background to my involvement by pretty much repeating that talk. I'm condensing it into about 20 minutes. And then we'll let Andrew take over and he'll describe in greater depth the musical content of the book and how it aligns with the vision. So my personal interest is in evangelizing the culture to save the West and bring people into the faith. A high aim, but we might as well aim high, I think. And my inspiration for this is very much rooted in the writings of John Paul II and Benedict XVI. Now, John Paul II said in Centesimus Annus, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the heart of every culture lies a response to the mystery of God. So that is that every culture manifests the core values of that society, and right at the heart of that is a response to the idea of God. So it manifests either God's existence and his church, or a rejection of that. And most cultures will be a mixture of that, but the goal here is to move steadily more towards a Christian culture which speaks of God and his church. Doing so, usually, I have to say, a culture does this not explicitly. There are very obvious Christian messages in some aspects of the culture, clearly, and that's important. But much of it in the contemporary culture, it rests upon assumed values. It's indirect, but nevertheless consistent with it. And that is a beautiful culture that speaks of the love of God through the actions of the people and the work that they do. So we've heard it said that culture is downstream of politics. It's a common phrase now. But we could also say, building on John Paul II, that the faith is downstream of culture and worship is downstream of faith. In other words, if we worship well and in harmony with beautiful art, music, and architecture, and everything works together, then we are supernaturally transformed in Christ into faithful Christians, but also Christian culture creators who can influence others through the joy and beauty of our lives. Now, to transform society as a whole is a generational task. It's a long-term goal. But with God's help, I think we can envisage that if we take responsibility for our own lives and relationships, we can perhaps see that society can be transformed one personal relationship at a time. That's the vision I had, and I still have. Now, the way of beauty that I referred to is rooted in the idea of the graced imagination. We are called to be co-creators with God, shaping the world around us beautifully and inspired by him. This grace-filled creativity applies potentially to every human activity. So it should be reflected in ourselves and in our lives and how we live. It should speak of love and beauty and grace. And this really is both a responsibility and a privilege. God doesn't need us to do his work, to raise up creation, so to speak, but he invites us to participate in it for our greater joy in this life and for his greater glory. The Way of Beauty is a program of spiritual and practical formation for people of any background and with any level of artistic ability, that's important, or no ability. It is a Christian formation based upon what was given to great artists in the past. And through a series of spiritual exercises, very traditional Christian approach to things, and the learning of practical skills in the pursuit of beauty, we discover our personal creative calling and then contribute to society beautifully, gracefully, joyfully, in service to God and neighbor, and for the good of all. The outcome is new habits that sustain a life of faith and can be carried into any field of study or any profession, indeed any human activity, as I mentioned, and will promote the common good through beauty. And importantly, all of this is ordered toward a life of faith and joy. And it works like this. First, it helps us discern our personal vocation while developing habits of prayer, meditation, and the creation of beauty, as I mentioned. We can choose any discipline we like, whether music, gardening, art, or something else. And as I mentioned, we pick something to stimulate that creative impulse. We don't necessarily have to believe we're any good at it in advance. But what happens is that these practices stimulate the creative faculty within us, open us up to inspiration, and allow that inspiration to manifest itself most powerfully in the mission that God really does have for us. So once we discover our vocation, this creative impulse informs and strengthens it. The program is designed people who are not only transform themselves, but then can go on and help others and mentor others in it. And so this is how we imagine an organic growth, person to person, transforming the culture and the society. So that's the hope. Those interested in finding out more, as I mentioned, can contact me through IHE maybe, or the website of the Scholar Foundation, scholarfoundation.org. There is, in complement to the spiritual program, if we can call it that, of the Way of Beauty, an intellectual basis of it is provided through a master's program at Pontifex University, the online Catholic university, where I'm Dean of the Faculty of Sacred Arts. So that's something that people might want to investigate. Now, coming to the Psalms, a key part of the process is the regular praying of the Psalms. This is a liturgically centered program and formation, and we encourage people to pray the Psalms in the home and parish, ideally chanted, and with an icon corner or image corner, and we help people to establish one of those in their home, so that we engage the whole person in prayer. We consider posture, we're engaging the vision, we're singing, we can even have some incense burning if we like, and all the senses are engaged and conformed to the act of worship in the domestic church. So in the family or groups of families gathering in neighborhoods. And this is the natural place for this. We have a vision of people of all denominations inviting others into their homes to pray together. And when we pray the Psalms in the context of the Liturgy of the Hours, it stimulates within us that liturgical sense and builds a desire without us ever needing to make this explicit, if we don't want to, for Christ's presence in the Eucharist. I believe it draws all people into the church. And the Psalms are especially important within the context of the Liturgy of the Hours, and for several reasons. First, their evocative imagery inspires the spiritual imagination. lifting our sights to heavenly things. It engages the emotions, the language of the psalmist, and not always good emotions. It articulates very human failings, but then reorders them and directs them to Christ. The visual imagery that is contained within it, I believe God made us to respond to that naturally, and he effectively feeds our desire and our imagination, a desire for him through the imagination by stimulating it in this way, so directing it properly. And this is the graced imagination that we're referring to. It's the phrase we use. The second is didactic. St. Thomas Aquinas said, I must admit, I looked for the quote and couldn't find it, but I know I read it somewhere, that he said that it's the Psalms are the most important book in the Bible because they contain all of theology, in the sense that they reflect everything that came before them historically and anticipate everything that came afterwards, including Christ and the incarnation. And they are therefore a natural part, if I can use that phrase, of our worship. They speak for us as human beings and direct all our intentions to God and the praise of God, while teaching us theological truths. There is a phrase, lex orandi, lex credendi, rule of prayer, rule of faith. The best way to teach the truth is through the words of our worship and our prayer. And the church provides all those words for us, or God does through his church. So if the highest virtue is love, the highest aspect of that love is the love of God, also known as the virtue of religion. And God helps us to love him through the church's liturgy. Now, praying the Psalms can also bring Christians of diverse traditions together. As I mentioned, it raises everybody up in worship without descending to the lowest common denominator. Ecumenism often appeals to the sort of common ground at the lower end and leaves nobody satisfied. However, the Psalms allow people to come together and lifts us up together. And it does so without exposing doctrinal differences. For example, when praying evening prayer or Vespers together, we don't need to discuss the real presence in the Eucharist. Of course, I'm always happy to do so if anybody asks me, but we don't need to bring that up. And what Protestant, for example, will balk at praying the Bible, which is what we're doing. Furthermore, the Liturgy of the Hours complements Sunday worship, which can be the Divine Liturgy or the celebration of the Mass, of course, and leads us into deeper engagement with Christ present in the Eucharist, and enables us to take what we receive at Mass out into the world and apply it through God's grace in our daily lives. The general instruction of the Liturgy of the Hours describes this as though it was a bridge, and says that its purpose, and this is the quote, is to sanctify the day. It helps us to take what we receive in the Mass and in the Eucharist out into the daily world, and it leads us into the reception of what is offered to us in the Mass. And the Psalms are crucial in this. And leads us, I don't know, but dare I use the phrase, into an authentic, active participation in the liturgy without ever actually having to change the words of the Mass at all. So this is a way of preparing us spiritually for what we get in the Mass. Now, any valid translation approved for use in the liturgy is good to use, and we offer a way of pointing that your favorite text, this is the great strength of it, it's a pointing method, but the text that we chose in the Musica Domestica, the music of the home book, has particular value, we feel. We chose the Coverdale Psalter, which was originally Miles Coverdale's 16th century translation, and we use it in its 1928 revision, which is a perfect balance, for me anyway, of poetic and beautiful language, beautiful English, but nevertheless understandable. It's not so deeply Shakespearean, if I can put it like that, that everything is mystifying. But it is beautiful. It has that feel of elegant English. It's also particularly well suited to the Anglo-American experience, I would say, and to lay people. Its language has been used in the English-speaking world for centuries, and the Psalter is organized according to a 30-day cycle in just 2 offices a day. So we can pray the whole Psalter, all 150 Psalms through morning and evening prayer, and that's manageable. At least it's possible as an ideal for busy people, I would say. And its layout is rooted in pre-Reformation Catholicism, in the Sarum use of the Roman Rite. So Sarum is an ancient name for the town of Salisbury, and really that is the liturgy that was adapted by Anglicans after the Reformation in many ways. There were other influences too, and subsequently adopted by many Protestant denominations in its setting, which was the Book of Common Prayer, and therefore has shaped the spiritual imaginations of English-speaking peoples for centuries. And now, coming full circle, the Coverdale Psalter, the Psalter itself, is approved for use by Catholics and even Orthodox Christians at this point. So it seems to be a natural coming together in a liturgical setting for Christians in the English-speaking world, and especially in America, where there are many denominations, but the whole Anglosphere, therefore, I suggest. And now, one other quick thing. How long have I got? Okay, I better tie up here. So just one little thing is that that was the talk that I gave pretty much when I was in Notre Dame that day. It was to parents and teachers of this classical academy. And Andrew approached me afterwards and asked if I had any version of the Psalms that I was referring to that could be sung in the home, because he wanted something for his family, is what he said. And he'd been trying various versions, and none of them seemed satisfactory to him for various reasons. And I couldn't believe what he was asking. I said, well, yes, this has been my lifetime project. I've been doing this for 20 years. It's just sitting on the shelf, so to speak. I've been working out a pointing system and how to adapt Gregorian chants and modes, the tones, with very little change, but how to apply them to the English text. And it can be used for any translation. I happen to have the Coverdale Psalter ready to send him, and I sent that along to him. And I'm going to say something like 2 weeks later, he came to me and described a project that he was thinking about, which was writing a book that would encourage a culture of song in the family home, with psalms, but also hymns, devotional songs, a repertoire of sacred music, and even folk songs, just to encourage a culture of song and music that would change and revolve around the cycle of the liturgical year. And the goal was to elevate musical awareness and a musical literacy. I'm not quite sure if that's quite the phrase, but in families, to attune them to the traditional forms of church music, and thereby stimulate a deeper participation in the liturgy and elevate the domestic church in its natural role as leading, according to Benedict XVI, the new evangelization, the driving force for it, through the faith and practices of families and communities in neighborhoods. But from there, informing and raising up what goes on in the parishes too. So that is how it started. And It will be published in November through Word on Fire Publications, a 2-volume book, one of them containing the Psalms, called Musica Domestica. And so with that, at exactly 20 past, I will hand over to you, Andrew.
Well, it's a joy to be with you here, David, and thank you all for tuning in. As David mentioned, my name is Andrew Goldstein, and I am a Director of Mission Advancement with the Vigil Project. We are largely a devotional apostolate. Our work professionally is how do Catholics and larger Christians in the larger church have music to pray with in their day-to-day lives beyond the conversation of what's happening in the liturgy. But as you might imagine, this is 2026, and liturgy is sort of front and center with much of the world right now. And a lot of the conversation around music, you're likely experiencing this in your own parishes and communities, comes back to like what's happening in the Mass. So my role within the Vigil Project is to help parishes, to help priests, bishops, music directors ask and answer that question. What is the music that's appropriate to the Mass? And then what do we do with everything else that might still be efficacious for prayer, but actually doesn't have a natural home in the Mass? And that is that's the lived life of devotion. And so a lot of our work as an organization, you might imagine paving a highway for the wide path of music and how we use it in our day-to-day lives. I say all that up front because actually what I want to focus in on more is the other side of my life, and probably the more important side of my life, which is I'm a father of 5 daughters. My oldest is 11, my youngest is 1, and my wife, Erin, she'll actually join me to sing here in a moment to just demonstrate some music. This idea of musica domestica actually comes from our home, perhaps informed by what I'm experiencing in the parish, but certainly informed by my own experience as a father of being like a Catholic music director and feeling very comfortable making music in the Mass or making music to lead people in prayer. But quite frankly, coming home and sitting at the piano and quite honestly freezing, not being entirely sure what to do. I desired to lead my own family in prayer and song. But it seemed to me that there was a few things. For one, a confidence gap of, almost feeling like the imposter syndrome in my own home of, can I really do that here? And maybe further, the repertoire gap, not really quite understanding what it is that we're supposed to sing in the home. And so early on, we tried a few things. We would sing, Wheels on the Bus and, pirate shanties. And eventually we landed on, we should start with the Psalms. We should start praying the Psalter. This happened to be around COVID time. I was home a lot more, and we picked up a Mundelein Psalter. And I will tell you profoundly, I mean, at this point, I had 3 daughters. They were all much, much younger. And to watch this sense of our home transition in song was just remarkable. We started with just simple chanted psalms, began singing kind of the more common prayers, began learning the Marian antiphons, and I just watched as like my daughters would kind of in the course of their day, be singing the Magnificat and the Benedictus, age 3 and 5. And I think it just started to dawn on me that there's something more here. There's something more in the way that, for one, the Liturgy of the Hours is kind of the peak of music making in the home. But then further, like maybe there's more than Wheels on the Bus. Maybe there's something more I could be singing that actually helps to inspire, guide, form musically our home in the same way that I'm teaching in the church and parishes, that what we sing really matters, that this forms our faith, and that the words have to be very intentionally chosen. And so I began to consolidate repertoire. I looked everywhere I possibly could for hymn books or song books. My wife will attest that there was probably 3 to 5 books from eBay from the 1800s and 1900s showing up every single week, and I'm thumbing through them trying to find like what works well here. And I gotta say, it began to get a lot clearer that there's kind of a sense of what good music in the home is and what good music in the home isn't, and that good music in the home really has qualities of truth, goodness, beauty, that it flows from the place of the Liturgy of the Hours and flows into our daily lives, that there is a place for authentic art forms like folk music, classical music, expressed religious art forms like hymns, praise and worship, or devotional song. But also probably the biggest deficiency that most homes are not even anywhere near is chant. How do we understand the treasury of music that the church has and actually live this out in our day-to-day lives? And so I began to compile. I recognized pretty quickly that there was not a lot of resources out there, and certainly no major publisher had taken on a project like this in a quite a long time. The last one that was, I would say, major was 1955, Maria von Trapp's Around the Year with the Von Trapp Family. It's a remarkable book. If you want to go find it, there's been a reprint of it more recently. But in this book, she kind of similarly lays out, if we had a season, Advent, what should we sing? We should sing some chant. We should sing some hymns, maybe some folk music. She herself would admit that, a lot of the music she chose was very Austrian. And so, as I'm sitting in my home, I'm wondering, well, what music is our music? What music is 2026 for a family living in South Bend, Indiana? And so I just began to compile and began to teach songs and organize them into liturgical seasons. And it was certainly around this time that David and I met and began to maybe put a deeper conceptualization into what a project like this might be, which is the deeper, how do we lead families in song? How do we teach them to pray with music? What's the pour over effect from that into the life of the parish? If you begin to teach, such as my own children at ages 3 and 5, the Magnificat, well, they're actually going to react a lot less at age 25, 35, 45 when a parish is trying to incorporate, sacred chant and the treasury of music. So what needs to be planted in the household early on? So maybe just to talk through like a few of these categories, and certainly I hope you find the book and get it in November. But even if you wanted to take a step today, my goal is just to give you maybe something to hold on to. So for instance, to take the season Christmas or Advent, to look at, what are chants that the church is incorporating during this time? You can find incredible resources, such as an online site like Gregobase, Gregobase, where you can find all of the chants proper to every season and all of the chants of the ordinary, all laid out in beautiful music. Well, what would it look like if we took something like, Puer Natus or Hodie Christus Natus Est, these kind of iconic chants of the season that proclaim the incarnation? Well, we can find the music, we can find a recording, and maybe we start teaching these things. That might be daunting. And if you're sitting here saying like, we're not even anywhere near to that, I would say that's great. And that's okay. The volume actually has tons of music within. So it contains hymns you might be familiar with, like, for instance, Advent, Christmas, Of the Father's Love Begotten, or, Hark the Herald Angels Sing, things like common hymns that you would sing during these periods. And then it flows. So it flows from chants to hymns, and then it flows into devotional song. I would say that this is almost like rungs on the ladder. And as we kind of get wider and wider, these are things that are perhaps further from the purpose of sacred, but certainly efficacious in the life of prayer. Devotional music, such as even what the Vigil Project itself writes, is just meant to encounter where you are in your daily life and ask God to just come to you. I think that a lot of loud voices in the church are skeptical of the purpose of devotional music or praise and worship music, because there's a sense that all music has to be for the Mass. But actually, this music has a deep purpose in just our daily lives. In the Mass, we are sort of more docile. We enter into a community of song, and we put aside our preference for a moment to take on the great treasury of the church and be ascended to God. Whereas in the life of devotion, why this is so very important to have in a book like this, kind of flips the equation. It's actually to say, God made me the way that I am, and to like the music that I like. That's a God-given gift that I like this particular music or that particular music. And I'm still asking God to encounter me here in my daily lives, in my likes, in my desires, in what I know and am familiar with. There's an immense value to that in our life of prayer and our relationship with the Lord, that we actually in ordering it in the right places, the sacred for the sacred and the devotional for the devotional, both are beautifully correct in a way to instill a life of faith, especially in our families and in our homes. So it goes from chants to hymns to devotional music. And then it continues on into what we call the transcendentally oriented secular. It's not to say all other music is bad, but it's to say that some music in particular really strongly embodies the good, the true, the beautiful. So within folk music and classical music, these are the last genres that we explored to incorporate within this book. These transcendentally oriented things, you can still experience something of the human condition, of God, of the realities of raising a family or having a job or things like that, that still actually point us back up the ladder, still point us to the sacred. And so even sometimes in a folk song that has nothing to do with the faith, this is of high value to sing in the home, even as part of our family time, as part of our formation in goodness, truth, and beauty. And so, an instance like this, we in our family love singing like the Crawdad song, classic, like silly folk song about, crawdads in the lake and you're going to, fish them and, you put them in a bag and there's a hole in the bag and they all go back to the lake. And so the song goes on and on and on. And that might sound silly to sing at home, but there's something more important about singing that than singing, for instance, the wheels on the bus, because there's something much more true about just like, well, this is how life is sometimes, that we go fishing, that there's a hole in the bag and off it goes again. And we can learn something about patience, about fortitude, even in these things. There's a virtue orientation within that I think is really important. And so in whole, the book journeys through every liturgical season from Advent all the way through the liturgical year and back to Advent again. Even within times that we might not consider liturgical seasons, like the very long summer ordinary time, it's actually broken up into kind of chunks. What does early ordinary time feel like in the summer? Then, later where we have, for instance, the Feast of the Archangels, in August, the Feast or Solemnity of the Assumption. These are kind of important moments, even in the course of ordinary time, that informs maybe what we could be singing in the home. And so the book is oriented and ordered in that way. And so volume 1 just gives you about 90 to 100 songs of all these different varieties to incorporate within your family, your home. And actually, I say family, I truly mean like if you are a family and you have kids, that's you. But I also mean that's a community. If you are single, if you're widowed, etc. When I say family, I actually do mean you too. That this is something that could be used to bring a community around you, and to just uplift your community. Now, the beautiful thing about this is incorporating music within your day-to-day life. For one, just makes your life way more beautiful, fun, but it also gives it an order. And this is where the second volume comes in, which is that when you have a huge repertoire of music and it all kind of points to the faith, there's a need for a height. In the same way where, we have the Mass as sort of the height within our expressed liturgical life of faith, there needs to be a height in the home too. And this is where the value of the Psalms really comes to play. And so as David mentioned, he has set all 150 songs and pointed them. They use Gregorian tones, which is honestly very, very beautiful and striking. But it also uses English. So there's not perhaps a Latin barrier or an understanding barrier, especially with young children. It uses poetic English from the Cultivating Psalter. And I think this is really beautiful. I would say from my own experience, even just going from we more frequently use the Mundelein Psalter, going into like we as a family are learning this again, stepping back and saying we're actually going to learn these Gregorian tones. We're going to sing these at home. I have to say again, it's been very interesting to see how this has played out. For those who are curious, the Mundelein Psalter is really an amazing project, an amazing resource, but it has kind of one tone, one line of music for every psalm. And what David's done here and why this book is so particularly valuable is that you can sing all 150 psalms with just a single tone. And so it's pointed in a way, and its instruction is given in a way, resourcing is given in a way that if a family can learn a single line, do 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 do, they can actually sing all 150 psalms without the, honestly, like imposter syndrome or barrier of like, I don't know these other tones, I don't really know how to do this, the pointing doesn't match the one that I know, etc. And so while it might be a little bit more of a daunting start, okay, we have to learn this Gregorian tone, we have to understand pointing, it's actually like a way better long-term outcome in that a whole family can sing all of the psalter just by learning one. And when they get comfortable with one, or when they feel like one is tiresome, well, they could go back to the well and draw another mode out, another tone out, and encounter the psalms in a fresh way with a completely different modality and tonality. I think that's really quite unique. And it puts that right into the heart of the household to help households not only like pray the Psalms, to grow together in unity, to orient their homes to the Lord, and to have a place from which all the other music kind of trickles down, flows down from. I think that this is valuable in many, many ways, because families are not always aware that the Liturgy of the Hours, for one, can be prayed by lay people, but two, that they can sing it, and that this doesn't need to be a monastery. I will tell you concretely, my home is not a monastery, and it doesn't feel like that. We're not desiring that it feels like that. But even amidst the chaos, even amidst, an 18-month-old falling off the couch and a 3-year-old running around, we still actually can come together as a family and pray with the Psalms. Even if we don't do the full hours, we actually still have the value of saying we can still pray with one. As we were writing the book, I remember being struck by this quote by Paul VI in Marialis Cultus in 1974. And he says, "The family is among the groups in which the divine office can be suitably celebrated in community. It is fitting that the family, as a domestic sanctuary of the church, should not only offer prayers to God in common, but also, according to circumstances, should recite parts of the Liturgy of the Hours in order to be more intimately linked with the church." And then it goes on to say, "The celebration of the Liturgy of the Hours is the high point which family prayer can reach." I will say, in my own experience, this has just been remarkably true, that the Psalms are just the high point of our prayer. And even in seasons where I feel as a tired, busy dad, that I maybe resist prayer, and we recommit and we go back to, okay, we're going to sing the Psalms tonight, that it continues to break open my heart and my home and unite my family in some profound ways. I guess I would lastly say, it's likely that there are some watching that might say, this is so far beyond my skill level, so far beyond my ability. I don't sing, I have no voice. For one, I want to encourage you that it doesn't take much musical skill. In fact, what we're doing is we're creating a host of video and audio resources to accompany this book, such that you can just listen, you can just take it in and pray with it, in the same way that you might take in, a Hallow app or a podcast, and say like, okay, I know that I can at least start. I can at least just listen to this, and then maybe I can start doing this. And the most beautiful thing is that we, especially the Psalms, set up in kind of a progressive form. So you could start as easy as singing just a monotone single note and just getting used to the text. And then we can progress. Maybe we do a drone and we teach you how to do that. Then maybe we incorporate the mode and we teach you how to do that. And I'll demonstrate that here in just a moment with my beautiful wife, who's going to come and sing a little bit with us, just to give you a sense of what that is. But lastly, I would say that if there's a kind of like a mental barrier of like, I just don't know if I can do that, I would love to turn actually to just a quote from Saint Pier Giorgio Frassati, our recently canonized young saint. And apparently he had just one of the most remarkably bad voices there is. And so there's this great quote from his teacher, Giovanna, who says, "I remember Pier Giorgio during a Christmas novena in the chapel of the Archbishop Palace. It had been quite a while since I heard a voice abused by everyone like that. It was especially remarkable because it was so powerfully tone deaf. Quote, 'That's Frassati singing,' someone said to me. I turned to look, and then I could see that there was a lot of faith and love in that scratchy, tone deaf singing." I think that Frassati, in many ways, is kind of like the emblem of those who maybe like feel scared of singing, that there is just a spirit of remembering that this is prayer, this is our relationship with the Lord, and this is our relationship with each other, and we do not fear singing badly or poorly, even if we're tone deaf. And so if there's any hesitation in your heart or in your home, I would actually say just take time and pray, and actually ask for the confidence of Saint Pier Giorgio Frassati. So before we take questions, which we will hear in a moment, I am going to just actually give you a brief example, invite my wife over, of what this sounds like and looks like to sing this. So we're going to sing the Coverdale translation of Psalm 51. I'm going to switch my audio so that this comes through just fine. Okay. And with that, I just invite you to just pray with us. Have mercy upon me, O God, after thy great goodness. According to the multitude of thy mercies, do away mine offenses. Wash me thoroughly from my wickedness, and cleanse me from my sin. For I acknowledge my faults, and my sin is ever before me.
Against thee only have I sinned, and done this evil in thy sight, that thou mightest be justified in thy saying, and clear when thou shalt judge.
Behold, I was shapen in wickedness, and in sin hath my mother conceived me.
But lo, thou requirest truth in the inward parts, and shalt make me to understand wisdom secretly.
Thou shalt purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Thou shalt wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow.
Thou shalt make me hear of joy and gladness, that the bones which thou hast broken may rejoice.
I'll pause there and note that as we host these even nights of liturgy, the hours in our home, or as we pray as a family, what's been really wonderful is as we alternate going back and forth, those who might feel more comfortable musically singing the mode can sing the first line as I did. And then those who might feel a little more timid or just want something more simple can use that second line that Aaron sang. It's just much more simple, drone with one note down and back. But the other really remarkable thing that we've been able to do, again, by David's guidance here, has actually just been to incorporate a drone ooh, especially for our children who can't read and can't sing, or can't read and can't, follow along with us in that way. And so it's really wonderful. Our younger children especially can just go, ooh, and I'll demonstrate what that sounds like with my wife now. Have mercy upon me, O God, after thy great goodness. According to the multitude of thy mercies, do away mine offenses. Wash me thoroughly from my wickedness, and cleanse me from my sin. And that's been really wonderful, especially if we have younger kids in the house who can't read but want to participate. This gives them an immediate entry point that we hadn't actually been able to find in other ways of praying the Psalms to date till we learn that. So I think it's been really wonderful. Yeah, thank you. And I think that we'll stop there. But what I want to say just prior is the book is coming November of 2026 with Word on Fire. You'll be able to find it on their websites. But of course, you can contact David or I if you have questions or want to be in touch or be notified about that in any way. I would love to be in touch, certainly. And I think as we turn to questions, just know that we're excited and hope that you do actually take the step in praying with music at home, that this is a gift to your families, a gift to your homes, and certainly a step forward in our culture in reclaiming song in the home. Why don't we turn to some questions? David, do you want to moderate the question?
All right, why don't I do that? So there's a couple of people actually at the beginning here, it's an interesting point, asking about the sort of old calendar and the new calendar. I've got some thoughts of this, who clearly they love the traditional Latin Mass, which is wonderful. And saying, one person said, do we need a second edition? I'd be interested to see what you say, Andrew. My thought is that most of the sacred music here predates 1962. So it's was developed for the traditional Latin Mass. And what I would say is that we don't get into specific Sundays very much in that detail. We're talking about a broad transition from season to season. So I would think that provided you're happy to sing in the language in which we present it, so Psalms in English, and then there are some Latin songs in there, aren't there? Traditionally, the Salve Regina, for example, the Marian anthems. I would think that you could just use those as you would very easily adapt it to that calendar. It's not a detailed presentation of the calendar. It's season by season. So, which might have a different name. There's no ordinary time, I know, but I think it should be possible to work out how to adapt it to the various seasons in the traditional calendar. What do you think, Andrew?
I completely agree with that. I think it's widely adaptable, and we looked at both calendars while we were sorting through music, and so there it is applicable. It is applicable to both. Again, it doesn't rely on the specific, this is the feast day, but rather a broader stroke of this is what this season of the church's music feels like, sounds like, has the character of, and how we can direct our homes devotionally in that way toward the liturgy.
Okay. Somebody says, first of all, this is one for you, Andrew. What was the Paul VI reference with? This is anonymous attendee. Paul VI reference with the domestic sanctuary and the song. Beautiful quotation.
Yeah.
Marialis Cultus, is it?
Marialis Cultus, Paul VI, 1974. You can find it on the Vatican's website.
Yeah, I would just concur that it is a beautiful encyclical, actually, about devotion to Mary. But it elevates very strongly the status of the Liturgy of the Hours as part of that devotion.
Specifically, section 53, if you want to look for the point.
Okay. So another question, I've got an answer to this, so maybe I'll come in first, then you comment. Somebody else, the same anonymous attendee, so thanks for these questions. Could you explain the importance of singing rather than stating or praying the Psalms? St. Augustine famously said that singing is to pray twice. Why is that so? Well, I don't know what Augustine had specifically in mind, but my thought on this is that the more we engage the whole person and order it to the prayer and the worship of God, the better it is. And so we want to engage all human faculties. So not just the voice, which then engages the ears as well, of course, in a particular way. But I would say, as an artist, I'm very interested in engaging the sight. This is something that even amongst good, pious Catholics, I would say, I mean pious in a good sense of the word, is not thought about very often, the engagement with visual imagery. Because it adds another dimension. So we pray 3 times. And if we have incense, we're engaging the sense of smell. We pray 4 times. And all of this, and then posture, if we consider whether we stand, sit, bow, our prayer becomes multifaceted. And if we think of the heart, praying with the heart is a phrase that's often used today emotionally to signify emotions, but really the heart is the core of us. It's our human center of gravity. And when all our thoughts and feelings and actions, which means the body and soul, are taken into account, where am I? And the more that all the senses and all the faculties are engaged, both physically and mentally, shall we say, the more chance the heart is going to be engaged with God.
I would add to that, just on a scientific level, there's been many studies about the effects of music on our physiology. And I think it's unique to know this in especially the instance of prayer, but this is true actually across the spectrum of music, that listening to music in particular, or singing music, has the physical effect of syncing our heart rates and our breathing. And so it brings those things actually into communion, in a sense, across all of us. So there's been studies at concerts, there's been studies in choirs that reflect this kind of incredible reality. In the sense, I mean, of course, if you're you know, if you believe in God, you would say like only God could come up with something like this. I mean, it is so, it puts me in complete awe to know that God has used music in this way actually to unify us, not just mind and heart, but actually like in full body. So when we sing the Psalms, or when we even sing in the Mass, I mean, that is the effect that is happening, is that we're not only spiritually drawn into a unison as the body of Christ in communion with one another, and then orienting ourselves to God and assent to the Lord, but we are physically doing that too. That to me speaks to the radical importance of singing at home, and especially if the Psalms are at the height of that, of placing the Psalms in that way, of being able to sing the Psalms as a means of, as a family in our home, drawing together body, mind, heart, soul, all that, and orienting toward God. So I think that's remarkable, and we can see something of the fingerprint of God in how that design works in our bodies.
Okay, we've got some questions from Grace, which are all very good, actually. Grace, so thank you. When do you recommend incorporating these songs? Should they be sung in a routine at the same time every day? Or how do you blend them into a sometimes unpredictable lifestyle for small children? Over to you, Andrew.
I would love to hear your answer too, because I know
I got an answer, but go on. Yeah,
yeah.
You've done it before.
For us, we've experimented, and so the kind of most stable point in our day, at least, is dinner time. And so we finish our dinner meal, you know, and we start to sense like, okay, you know, so and so is about to leave the table, and maybe we're losing attention or focus a little bit here, and we just pull out a guitar and we stay at the dinner table and just sing. Sometimes it's one or two songs, sometimes it's 5, 6, 7, 10. And then that kind of gets us to like dinner cleanup. And then after we do dinner cleanup, there's the time where, you know, if everyone's still stable and such, we can turn to prayer, especially. And so it's tough. I mean, just to say it, there's definitely a degree of flexibility that has to happen in the life of any family, especially with young children. But to recommit, and I will be the first to say, like, there are times I need to just recommit and just remember the goodness that comes. I think it's a powerful thing. And if you just pick a time that you can recommit to, that's always the easiest part. But right at the dinner table tends to be what's best for us, at least.
So I had some ideas on this. So one is that the role of the father can become very important, or the head of the family. I mean, there are many different family situations. I'm aware of that. So we all just do the best we can. But if there is an invitation to pray, and so I think to force people to do it all the time is not a good idea. But to say there are certain times when we're going to do this, but the other times, if they know that Dad, for example, is praying for the family, he is the head of the family, as Christ said of the church. In other words, an advocate to God for the family. And even if they don't want to join in, they know that Dad is doing this for them on a regular basis and is committed to it while other things are going on in the house, that might be a good sign to the children, it occurs to me. The other thing is that what we did was, I don't know whether this is a good idea or not, but effectively we had a gap in the meal. And we said, right, dessert after complet. so I mean, I will say we sort of effectively bribed them a little bit and said, we're going to get a scoop of ice cream. We're going to break now. And then we're going to sing a song. We didn't do this every day, but at a certain time, we break the meal up and then do a very short night prayer with children. Then that's what we did. And then, okay, now you can have dessert. And so they seem to sort of throw themselves into it. I will say that the idea for this, before I met Andrew, of praying in the home, came when I was staying with an Orthodox family who their dad led them after dinner in night prayer every day. And what they did was go around the family. So they had sort of 5 kids or something like that, and their dad was there. He led, and they just took it in turns to do, I think, short stanzas of the Psalms, and they did recto tono. So they just sang it all on one note. But they all wanted to do it, and at a certain point, what happened was that the 2 of the children started to fight because they were arguing over whose turn it was to sing the stanza. I remember thinking, this is the sort of argument you have in your family. This is a pretty good situation. They wanted to copy their dad. So I suppose it's not always going to be the same, but I just thought, actually, I think this is a good thing to do. And being an Orthodox family, they all gathered around an icon and faced the icon of Christ. Okay, I see we've got 4 minutes. One more question, they're saying. I'm just going to go down. I'll just try this one. From Alejandro. I'm a permanent deacon in a parish in Frederick, Maryland. I know it well, actually, Frederick. And we will be trying to pray the office, inviting families to the parish. This program would be ideal to encourage them and keep them doing as home. Okay, maybe, Andrew, talk a little bit about how we see it transitioning from home to parish. It's musica domestica, but what's the vision here, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to just say outright that these are of course linked. Like the parish and the home are linked, and what happens in the home certainly informs what happens in the parish, and the ease of that, particularly in the advancement of sacred music. But in the same way, the culture that the parish sets then pours back over to the home. And so I would say that if you're gathering to pray the hours, or if you're gathering in any like liturgical form, what I hope doesn't happen is that this book sits in the pews, musica domestica, in the pew pocket. That's not, of course, the intent here. But the deeper intent is that the pastor or deacon or music director can say, like, you're only here an hour a week. Actually, like, the life of faith happens all out there, and here's something that can help. To the degree that that's taught in the parish, I think is certainly like important and worth discerning and discussing as a parish leadership. And then the pour over effect is like when Catholics are singing beautiful sacred music at home, in addition to all these other things, that of course affects the parish. The ability of having trained singers, trained musicians at a young age who are aware of the repertoire and can be mentored into service in the parish. That's also going to be a beautiful effect of that. So yeah, that's what I would say.
And it seems to me that with regard to the Psalms, you could introduce this in the responsorial psalm, in the Novus Ordo, clearly. But the other thing is that what is happening here, my view of this is that it's easier to change yourself than change the whole parish. So we have more control in our family than we do, with all the families in the parish, and so we can do that. But if we attract people to what we're doing, then in time we can affect the taste, if you like, and the sensibilities of those in the parish, and gradually that will seep in and start to change what people want to do, and it become easier for the priest to introduce these things if he wants to, because there will be a receptivity to it, I would say.
David, in this last moment, I saw there's a couple questions just about how do they find the book. I'm going to just share quick a QR code. Here's a QR code, and you can scan this, and it'll notify us. Like, it'll take your email, and we can basically send you a note as soon as the book is out, if that's helpful to anybody.
All right, great. I think we're at time there. We have to tie up. So quickly get the QR code. Um, and thank you very much for IHE, Institute of Human Ecology, for hosting this. It's been a great privilege. So thank you and goodbye, everyone. I wish we could see you personally as we spoke to you.
Thank you, everybody.